Good morning. The Judiciary Committee will come to order, and without objection, the Chair is authorized to declare a recess at any time. Pursuant to notice, I now call up H.R. 5036 for purposes of markup and move that the committee report the bill favorably to the House. The clerk will report the bill.
H.R. 5036, to amend Title 17.
Without objection, the bill is considered as read and open for amendment at any point, and I will begin by recognizing myself for an opening statement. This morning, the committee will consider legislation introduced by the chairman of our Intellectual Property Subcommittee, Howard Coble. His legislation, H.R. 5036, the Satellite Television Access Reauthorization Act, would extend the expiring Section 119 copyright license for another 5 years, as this committee has done on previous occasions, most recently in 2010. This license ensures that when our constituents do not have access to a full complement of local network television stations, they can have access through satellite television carriers to distant network television stations so that consumers have a full complement of network programming to choose from. This helps ensure that consumers in rural areas, like my congressional district, have the same access to news and entertainment options that consumers in urban areas enjoy. Without enactment of this legislation, many of our constituents would potentially lose access to certain networks altogether on December 31st, when the current license expires. I would like to point out that although numerous stakeholders interested in video issues have contacted the committee on a variety of issues, they all agree that this license should not expire at the end of this year. Therefore, I welcome the legislation introduced by my friend from North Carolina, and I urge my colleagues to support it. And it's now my pleasure to recognize our ranking member, the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Conyers, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, this act extends for 5 years the license authorization provided in Section 119. Stakeholders should continue to work together to see if consensus can be obtained on other issues regarding the relationship between broadcast television stations and distributors. Stakeholders also include satellite and cable companies, content owners, and most of all, consumers. I've long held that content creators should be compensated appropriately for their works. Negotiations in the free market can often best ensure that artists and content creators are fairly compensated. However, we also need to consider the impact that disputes during retransmission consent negotiations have on consumers. In some cases, we've seen consumers pulled into the negotiations. No one should want to see that happen, and it's not good for consumers or the parties involved. And so I urge the stakeholders to continue working to reach consensus on how best to address this concern in a fashion that appropriately balances and protects the needs of everybody involved. And so I support the measure, congratulate Mr. Coble, and yield back the balance of my time.
Chair thanks the gentleman and now recognizes the chairman of the Intellectual Property Subcommittee, the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Coble, who is also the chief sponsor of this legislation, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You and the ranking member have pretty well covered it, Mr. Chairman. I'll make a brief opening statement. Today, the committee is reviewing an important piece of legislation that ensures our rural constituents continue to have access to distant network programming for another 5 years. This committee has regularly worked to assist our rural constituents, and we will do so again by ensuring that the network programming is available to all satellite subscribers. While I realize that current licenses are not perfect for everyone, but on balance, I would say that they do a good job. Not unlike many other bills, this legislation will not fully satisfy all stakeholders, but it should satisfy them enough, and most importantly, it serves the interests of our satellite viewing constituents. Mr. Chairman, not unlike your district, my district has a good number of rural subscribers and rural viewers who will benefit as a result if the reauthorization is approved today. And I thank you, and I yield back the balance of my time. Mr. Chairman, I pardon my raspy voice. I'm trying to come down with my early summer cold, so bear with me.
Well, the chair both thanks and sympathizes with the gentleman, and now recognizes the ranking member of the Intellectual Property Subcommittee, the gentleman from New York, Mr. Nadler, for his opening statement.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I support H.R. 5036, the Satellite Television Access Reauthorization Act of 2014, which renews for another 5 years a statutory license that allows satellite providers to retransmit distant signals into local broadcast areas in certain circumstances. This bill does not address the overarching licensing system, and we should continue to explore that as part of the committee's ongoing comprehensive copyright review. In the meantime, however, I support this 5-year reauthorization of the Section 119 distant into local satellite license. We still need answers as to how many households would actually lose one or more of the 4 major network channels if Section 119 were not renewed. I nonetheless support this clean 5-year reauthorization because it will ensure that consumers who are receiving service by virtue of the Section 119 license retain that service when the agreement providing for that service expires at the end of the year. Other issues were raised by witnesses at our hearings, including, as I've noted, the possible phase-out of licenses altogether, as well as issues that arise during retransmission consent negotiations. There was no consensus reached on how the committee, acting within its jurisdiction, might address these issues. I'm therefore pleased that this reauthorization does not reach beyond the renewal of the Section 119 license. I therefore urge my colleagues to join me in voting for this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Chair thanks the gentleman. Without objection, all other opening statements will be made a part of the record, and the bill is now open for amendments.
Mr. Chairman.
For purpose, the gentleman from Georgia seek recognition.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment to H.R. 5036, offered by Mr. Collins of Georgia.
I ask unanimous consent that the amendment be considered as read.
Without objection, the amendment is considered as read, and the gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes to explain his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Frankly, I agree with many of the statements in the that have been given in opening here, and also agree with my friend across the aisle, Mr. Nadler, that there's many things that we need to address going forward. And frankly, really frustrated that I have to be here at this amendment. But your willingness to let me discuss this important issue with my constituents and many of our colleagues' constituents, which we have all across the nation, is the fact that I have 4 orphan counties. If you've sat in any of the hearings on these issues, you've heard me talk about these counties. What is frustrating for me is I came to Congress out of a background in the state legislature and also other areas in which I felt that it is the role of government and the role of private to have private enterprise solve their problems, government to stay as far away as possible, providing proper regulation. But in the end, something actually happened, and something actually worked for the ones that we all work for, and that is the folks who pay the bills, who get up every morning, who go to work, who just want their life to be as normal as they can. Many of my constituents in these counties only have access to satellite services, and these providers are not able to offer in-state local news and weather to the residents of those counties. I know there are larger reforms on both sides of the copyright side of the issues and the telecom side of the issues that the Committee on Energy and Commerce should and will discuss in the weeks and months ahead. Yet this issue deserves our attention today because it is not isolated to the 9th District of Georgia. In fact, I've heard from many members whose constituents are facing similar situations. I've just chose to be the tip of the spear on many of these, and especially these orphan counties. Localism is important, and the current DMA system setup leaves my constituents feeling isolated and removed from their local communities. In advance of this markup, I have pursued all non-legislative options and ultimately was unable to find meaningful agreement among the parties. That's a nice way to put it, to say, I'm not going to move, I'm not going to move, we're not going to do anything. That's wrong. This means that the appropriate time and in the appropriate fashion, I will pursue legislative changes to fundamentally alter the way subscribers are able to receive programming and who determines what is their local market. One such legislative change is this amendment. My amendment is carefully written to remain within the narrow scope of the pending reauthorization legislation before us. This amendment would remove the statutory barriers that prevent satellite companies from bringing in the programming from the in-state DMA to specifically those counties who are considered orphaned using the Section 119 mechanism. This amendment is not a carve-out just for my district. It is carefully crafted legislation change to address the nationwide problem of counties being orphaned from their states due to the outdated DMA model perpetrated by Nielsen. Consumers deserve choice. They deserve affordable options. They deserve access to the programming they believe reflects their local community. And I offer this amendment on behalf of my constituents in Elbert, Hall, Franklin, and Stevens counties. However, I recognize that this committee and the Energy and Commerce Committee will undertake a more thorough and deliberative reform process that addresses the underlying laws that created these orphan counties. The problem we have here is something that I mentioned in another hearing just recently, and that is that we're at the point of protecting business models and at the expense of constituents. We're at the point of protecting, and I respect that. I respect each agency has to do what they feel is best in their own eyes, but in the end of the day, it is not about the agencies and private enterprises that we represent. It's about the people who just need help. I told the group the other day as they bickered back and forth in my office, I said, this is great. I have two warring parties, and I'm holding the hostages. I've got 4 hostages who won't move, who just won't help, but yet, because of government regulation, because of government dynamics, we have 2 parties who can't come together. This shouldn't happen. This is not what it's about. This is not what we should be about. And it not only affects this debate, it affects other debates. And the inactivity that I have seen, frankly, is appalling. Government shouldn't do this. This is not the way private enterprise should act. Constituents deserve better. I do plan to ask unanimous consent to withdraw the amendment, as I appreciate the chairman's willingness to help my district, and I respect the strategic decision to move forward with a clean 5-year authorization. But I do ask this committee to think about what we've talked about, to think about my orphan counties, but to think about your own constituents, and remember why we're here. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to withdraw the amendment.
Would the gentleman yield? Chair recognizes the gentleman for an additional minute.
I'll yield always to the chairman.
I thank the gentleman because I want to thank him for raising this important issue, and many of our colleagues have expressed concerns over the years about market-specific issues such as the ones you've raised, and I've had some of these issues in my district as well. Our constituents want to watch local content that is of most interest to them. Due to the way television markets are defined, constituent interests do not always match the lines drawn on a map. Sometimes constituents want to watch a television station that's in-state that are further away than a nearby out-of-state channel. In other situations, the opposite may be true due to the locations of major employers or favorite sports teams. Regardless of where a line is placed on a map, there should be a better system to ensure that our constituents have choices in what they view, including watching in-state television networks. So I look forward to working with my colleague from Georgia and other members of the committee on either side of the aisle that are concerned about this issue to try to find a way to accomplish this as we move forward.
And Mr. Chairman, I do appreciate that, and I think the one thing that this has proved over the past few days and even to this hearing today is that now I can safely go back to my constituents and say, I know who's your problem. With that, I yield back.
The Chair thanks the gentleman. Without objection, the amendment is withdrawn. Are there further amendments to H.R. 5036? There being none, and a reporting quorum being present, the question is on the motion to report the bill H.R. 5036 favorably to the House. Those in favor will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the bill is ordered reported favorably. Members will have 2 legislative days to submit views, and with pursuant to notice, I now call up House Joint Resolution 105 for purposes of markup and move that the committee report the resolution favorably to the House. The clerk will report the resolution.
H.J. Res. 105, conferring honorary citizenship of the United States on Bernardo D. Galvez y Madrid, Viscount of Galveston and Count of Galvez.
Without objection, the resolution is considered as read and open for amendment at any point, and I'll begin by recognizing myself for an opening statement. H.J. Res. 105 confers honorary United States citizenship on Bernardo D. Galvez y Madrid in recognition of his many contributions to and sacrifices for the cause of American independence. American citizenship is the highest honor that our country can confer upon a person who is a citizen of another land. The granting of honorary citizenship is a symbolic gesture that welcomes the recipient into our national family. Honorary citizenship is and should always be an extraordinary honor, not lightly conferred. Congress has granted honorary citizenship on only 6 occasions in the past to 7 individuals. The 7 recipients have been Casimir Pulaski, the Marquis de Lafayette, Mother Teresa, William and Hannah Penn, Raoul Wallenberg, and Winston Churchill. The last 2 recipients, Casimir Pulaski and the Marquis de Lafayette, both played crucial roles in the United States' victory in our Revolutionary War. General Galvez's contributions to the war effort compare very favorably with those of Casimir Pulaski and the Marquis de Lafayette. H.J. Res. 105 states that Galvez provided supplies, intelligence, and strong military support to the war effort. Indeed, the historical record indicates that, due to the British blockade of seaports on the eastern seaboard, Galvez's secretly coordinated smuggling operation and efforts to clear the Mississippi River of British influence helped ensure that George Washington's Continental Army received necessary weapons and other provisions. H.J. Res. 105 states that Galvez recruited an army of 7,500 men and led the effort of Spain to aid the United States colonists. He and his troops seized the port of New Orleans and successfully defeated the British at battles in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Natchez, Mississippi, and Mobile, Alabama. Commentators and historians have uniformly lauded General Galvez's bravery, tenacity, and tactical military skill in rapidly assembling and leading a diverse, multi-ethnic regiment. Galvez's forces were victorious in every battle into which he led them. H.J. Res. 105 states that Galvez led the successful 2-month siege of Pensacola, Florida, where his troops captured the capital of British West Florida and left the British with no naval bases in the Gulf of Mexico. The historical narrative surrounding Galvez's actions leading up to and throughout the 2-month-long Battle of Pensacola underscores his heroism and leadership in pursuit of the objective of pinning down the British forces and driving them from the Gulf of Mexico. There is no question that keeping the British occupied on a second front during the war was critical to the success of George Washington's campaign. Some historians have noted that the timing and length of the Battle of Pensacola, in particular, impacted the number of forces and ships the British could commit to the Battle of Yorktown, the final campaign of the Revolutionary War. Finally, H.J. Res. 105 states that Galvez's victories over the British were recognized by George Washington as a deciding factor in the outcome of the Revolutionary War. I believe that Bernardo D. Galvez y Madrid amply deserves honorary citizenship, and I urge my colleagues to support this bill. And I now recognize our ranking member, the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Conyers, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would be less than candid if I say that this is a familiar name in American history or even law school for me. But if all of my friends and colleagues, mostly from Florida, say that this gentleman deserves honorary citizenship, who am I to block it at this stage of so long a period of time that this has been worked on? And so for that reason, I'm going to go along with this, and let's make him another honorary citizen, a rare honor that assume that he deserves, and I'll put the rest of my statement in the record and yield back my
Would the
time.
gentleman yield?
Of course.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. I neglected to mention in my remarks that this legislation was introduced by the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Miller, who is the chairman of the Committee on Veterans Affairs, and I thank him for his interest in remembering and recognizing Mr. Galvez.
All right.
I understand that the chairman of the Immigration and Claims Subcommittee does not have a statement, but that the ranking member does, so the chair now recognizes the gentleman from California, Ms. Lofgren, for
Thank
her
you,
opening
Mr.
statement.
Chairman. I do support today's measure. The individual, as has been mentioned, led major military campaigns that helped us win the war, and he also helped draft the terms of the treaty that ended the war. And while, as the chairman has indicated, we do not grant honorary posthumous citizenship lightly, this case meets the high standard for those rare instances in the past. I'll enter my full statement into the record, but I also wanted to take the opportunity to recognize that many foreign nationals continue to carry on the proud tradition of Bernardo de Galvez by enlisting in our armed forces. The President of the United States just last week presided over a naturalization ceremony for active duty service members and their spouses, and like so many immigrants from around the world who come to our shores, these people deeply believe in our values. They work hard to contribute to our community. We owe them a debt of gratitude, and I'm glad they were able to earn their American citizenship with all of the rights and responsibilities. I agree with this bill. I'll vote for it, but it would be difficult not to note that while we are doing this justifiable bill, the far greater challenge of comprehensive immigration reform has not been taken up by this committee or this House, and I find it myself concerned that while we do this meritorious measure that has been undone for several hundred years, we are continuing to neglect our emerging and urgent need to reform our immigration laws from top to bottom. And with that, I would ask unanimous consent to put my full statement in the record and would yield back.
Chair thanks the gentlewoman, and without objection, all their opening statements will be made a part of the record. We will recognize members on their motion to strike, and we will also ask if there are any amendments to House Joint Resolution 105 at this time. For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
Move to strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I hate to be the one to raise questions about this. And I confess that, like the ranking member of the full committee, I've never heard of this gentleman until now. And everything I'm about to say is based completely and only on the text of the resolution as it tells us his history. And it says that he led the effort of Spain to aid the U.S. colonists against Great Britain. And after the war, he served as Viceroy of New Spain, and he won various battles and recruited an army. Now, Pulaski and Lafayette, who are the other two revolutionary heroes whom we have honored with American honorary citizenship, came to the United States to aid the American cause. From the text of this resolution, General de Galvez apparently served simply as a Spanish general in the armed forces of Spain, which engaged in a war against Great Britain and happened to help the United States as part of their war against Great Britain. Is there any evidence that he did anything or with any motive to help the United States as opposed to being simply a general in the Spanish forces who warred against Great Britain, helped get that territory for Spain, served as Viceroy of New Spain after the Revolutionary War before they gave it to France? I mean, I'm not opposed to this resolution. I'm just wondering, there are a lot of generals of countries allied with the United States in various wars. We don't give them honorary citizenship. Why is this different?
Well, first of all, I believe that the Marquis de Lafayette was a French citizen who came to the United States and aided the United States, but was a French. He did not give up any of his French titles, and including military titles, in order to do that. But I would also add that clearly both France and Spain intended to aid the United States in its seeking of independence from Britain, and that being recognized by George Washington as having conducted a military campaign that was critical to the success that the United States enjoyed in the Revolutionary War would indicate that this was not just something that he was doing for his own country, but that was also done to benefit the United States.
Let me just say that the Count de Lafayette came to the United States as a volunteer, not as part of French forces. I'll assume that the sponsors of this resolution know something more than is in the text here, which makes this individual deserving of this, and I'll certainly support the resolution.
Chair thanks the gentleman. For purpose the gentleman from Georgia seek recognition.
Move to strike the last one.
Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
Just would like to know what happens as a result of the conferral of citizenship upon this gentleman.
It is a purely symbolic recognition of a contribution that this gentleman made in American history, as would be noted for some of the other people, some of whom had little, if any, contact with the United States. For example, Mother Teresa, whose work is legendary and of great interest to humanity, but in sort of response to the gentleman from New York's point that he raised, it recognizes her as an honorary citizen, even though I think her work was almost predominantly or overwhelmingly done in India, not in the United States.
Yes, certainly she was what one would call a humanitarian of a special breed, an outstanding humanitarian at that, and a female, I might add. I myself am unaware of the history of this gentleman and don't know that it rises to the level of that kind of importance, but I will yield to the desires of my friends on the other side of the aisle and probably support this.
Are there any amendments? What person, the gentleman from Tennessee, seek recognition?
Strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
I just want to ask the chair, it appears Florida is behind this. This is a Florida deal, and they're trying to catch up. That Texas has named Galveston for this gentleman, and Louisiana has named St. Bernard Parish for him, and Florida has only named him a Great Floridian. Can anybody tell me who the other Great Floridians are? Is Steve Spurrier one of them by chance? If Steve Spurrier is, that could create a problem in Tennessee.
This resolution does not honor or recognize Steve Spurrier. However great a football player he may have been.
Are there any other Great Floridians that we know that are involved in this? Who are the other Great Floridians that are? Jeff Miller. That's enough. I yield back.
Chair thanks the gentleman. Are there amendments to H.J. Res. 105? There being none, the question and a reporting quorum being present, the question is on the motion to report the resolution, House Joint Resolution 105, favorably to the House. Those in favor will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the resolution is ordered reported favorably.
I don't know who it was.
Members will have 2 days to submit views. This concludes our business for today. Thanks to all of our members for attending and for their historical curiosity, and this meeting is adjourned.